You are in a room full of people. Someone across the room laughs too loudly. Someone else is checking their phone under the table. A third person has been nodding along to the conversation for 10 minutes without saying a single word. And somehow, without meaning to, you already know which one of them noticed everything that just happened. It was the quiet one. Not because quiet people are mysterious, not because silence is some kind of superpower handed out at random, but because the human brain, when it stops producing words, does something remarkable. It starts absorbing them instead. And that shift, that invisible pivot from output to input, changes what a person can perceive, how deeply they process it, and what they do with it long after everyone else has moved on. Here's what the science actually says about why quiet people see more than you think. Your brain has a fixed amount of processing power at any given moment. Cognitive scientists call this attentional bandwidth. Think of it like a river. The water flows constantly, but you can only divert it in so many directions at once. When you are speaking, holding a conversation, forming opinions out loud, managing your tone, choosing your words, you're using a significant portion of that river just to keep talking. The quiet person in the room is not using that bandwidth. They have redirected it entirely toward observation. In 1998, psychologist Elaine Aron published research on what she called the highly sensitive person, a trait found in roughly 15 to 20% of the population, and notably more common among people who self-describe as quiet or introverted. Her work showed that these individuals process sensory input more deeply at a neurological level. They are not imagining more. They are literally registering more, catching micro-expressions, tonal shifts, environmental details that most people filter out before it ever reaches conscious awareness. But here's the part that surprises people. Sensitivity and introversion are not the same thing. You can be an extrovert who is also highly sensitive. You can be quiet without being introverted. The common thread is not personality, it is processing depth. And processing depth is shaped by one simple thing. How much of your brain is busy talking right now? In 2012, neuroscientist Mary Helen Immordino-Yang published findings on what happens inside the brain during quiet reflection. Her team at the University of Southern California discovered that when people are not actively engaged in social output, the brain's default mode network switches on. This network is responsible for imagination, empathy, self-reflection, and the integration of complex social information. It is, in the most literal sense, the part of your brain that connects the dots, and it can only run when you are not talking. This is not a metaphor. The brain regions that support active speech and social performance actively suppress the default mode network when engaged. The two systems do not comfortably run at the same time. You are either performing or you are processing, rarely both at once. The quiet person in the corner at a party is not being antisocial. Their brain is doing something that the loud room has made neurologically impossible for everyone else. Think about the last time you had a conversation that felt exhausting. Not because the topic was difficult, but because the social performance of it drained you. You were managing how you came across, what impression you were making, whether you were being interesting enough, or funny enough, or agreeable enough. That performance has a cost, and the bill comes out of the same account your observational powers draw from. Hans Eysenck, the British psychologist who spent decades studying the neuroscience of introversion, proposed in the 1960s that introverted people have a naturally higher baseline level of cortical arousal. Their brains are already running closer to their stimulation limit. This means that in high-input environments, they automatically begin filtering down to protect themselves from overload. And filtering, when you do it carefully, makes you more precise, not less aware. Eysenck was not saying quiet people are smarter, he was saying they are more selective. And selectivity, when trained toward social observation, produces something that looks a great deal like wisdom. You have probably experienced this yourself. A quiet friend who, after a dinner party, tells you something about one of the other guests that you completely missed. A small comment they made that revealed tension or insecurity or loneliness. Something that was visible to anyone who was paying attention, except most people at that table were too busy performing their own version of themselves to notice. The quiet person noticed, because they were not performing, they were watching. There is a concept in social psychology called the observer effect. In its original form, it describes how the act of measuring something changes the thing being measured. But applied to human behavior, it works in reverse. The person who is not being observed, who has stepped outside the performance loop, gains a clarity that no one inside it can access. The quiet person, by not seeking attention, becomes invisible to the social performance happening around them. And from that invisible position, they see everything. Adam McHugh, a counselor and author who has written extensively on introversion and quiet people in social settings, describes this as the listening advantage. He argues that our culture has systematically undervalued deep listening as a cognitive skill, treating it instead as a passive default, something you do while waiting to talk. But real listening, the kind quiet people tend to practice, is not passive at all. It is active, effortful, and extraordinarily information-rich. When you listen the way a quiet person listens, you are not just tracking words. You are tracking rhythm. You are noticing what someone avoided saying. You are registering the half-second delay before they answered a question. You are building a model of the person in real time, updating it constantly, filtering for truth beneath the performance. Most people are building a model of themselves instead. How they look, how they sound, whether they are winning. And here's the part that gets genuinely strange. Quiet people often do not realize they are doing this. The observation is automatic. They are not sitting in the corner smugly cataloging everyone's flaws. They are simply open. And when you are open, everything pours in. This is why quiet people are often the last to speak in a group discussion and the first to say the thing that reframes the entire conversation. They have been holding the whole room in their mind. When they finally open their mouth, they are not contributing their perspective. They are synthesizing yours. There is real cost to this too. Observing deeply and constantly is its own form of fatigue. When your default mode network is running at full capacity, absorbing microsignals from every person in a room, it is not restful. It feels like stillness from the outside. From the inside, it is work. This is why quiet people often need time alone after social situations. Not because they dislike people, because they have been paying more attention to the people in that room than anyone in that room ever realized. Elaine Aron described this in her later research as a kind of sensory hangover. The information has been absorbed. The nervous system needs time to sort through it, to integrate what it received. And during that integration period, the quiet person begins to understand things about the people they just spent time with that those people do not yet understand about themselves. You have been that quiet person. Not always, maybe not often, but in some room, at some moment. You have gone silent and started watching, and you notice something that no one else saw. Something small, a flicker, a hesitation, a word that landed wrong. You probably said nothing. There was no opening. Or the moment passed, or it felt too strange to name. But you saw it, and long after everyone else had forgotten what was said, you still had it. That is not introversion. That is not shyness. That is not some personality quirk to be managed or overcome. That is your brain doing what human brains evolved to do when they stopped filling silence with sound. We imagine that history was made by the loudest voice in the room, the one who spoke first, who commanded attention, who declared. And sometimes that is true. But every revolution was also shaped by someone who watched first, who read the room before they read their speech, who understood from long practice and deep silence exactly what the crowd needed to hear and why. The quietest person in the room is rarely the least informed about it. You will probably find yourself in a conversation where you go quiet for a moment, where you stop forming words and start just watching. And if you pay attention to that moment, to what you notice in it, to what enters your awareness when you stop broadcasting, you will understand something about yourself that no amount of talking ever could have told you. You have always been observing. You just forgot to notice that you were.